Alright everyone, welcome to the most astonishing Biden gaffe yet, and how does he even have a candidacy? The fact that he hasn't been, like, deplatformed and depersoned by his own political party, because if anyone else said this, and I'll go through that in a second, they'd be depersoned essentially. How that hasn't happened yet, like they haven't thrown him under the bus in favor of someone who's actually a viable candidate, is beyond me. I think even the neoliberals behind him, behind the campaign, bankrolling it and so forth, they must know that there's a severe fucking problem with this dude. I would not be surprised if they try to keep him off the debate stage, and I am being serious when I say that. I said it months ago, and it was sort of like, well, you know, it's sort of a funny idea, Biden chickens out of the debates because he's demented or something, haha. It was semi-serious then, it's fully serious at this point. There's a link in the description to the Team Trump post of this. And Joe Biden mysteriously making the claim here where he says, unlike the African-American community, and I'm quoting Biden, so please, you know, don't deplatform me, brah, because if I were to say this, like, for myself, it would probably be considered racially insensitive enough to probably get you banned. So I'm just quoting Joe Biden here. He says, well, unlike the African-American community, with a few notable exceptions, Kamala Harris or something, the Latino community is really diverse. There's a lot of different ideas and stuff. I'm thinking to myself, so basically he's making a slightly more sophisticated, rhetorically at least, version of the they're all the same sort of argument at the moment. Like a literal stereotype. Okay, so the black community is homogenous, in other words, is what Biden is saying. But as far as those Latinos of the, hey, I want your vote, maybe this is a reaction. Maybe he's just trying to drive a racial wedge between black and Latino voters in order to shore up the latter in order to get 51% of the popular vote or something. I wouldn't put it past him to have such a scummy strategy. I mean, the idea that black voters are a homogenous bloc, there's some ideological homogenization going on, or some ethnic homogenization is clearly and purely wrong. You look for, the funny thing is, he's like, when you make the all the same argument, he's basically saying, well, they look all the same, they sound all the same to me, like, you know, he refers to them as the help, like Hillary Clinton would, with her hot sauce handbag bullshit comments years ago in the last election. Note to everybody, there are different groups within the broader Hispanic or Latino or whatever term you want to use, sort of lexicon. A person from Argentina and a person from Mexico aren't the same thing. A person from Spain and a person from Brazil aren't the same thing. And if you make the argument that they're somehow homogenized, they'll be pissed off. Reasonable people will be flummoxed at how you can make such a mistake. However, in the broader category of black, at least for U.S. terms, there is a homogenizing factor there. The problem, it's not reality. There's a difference between a person who is of Maasai lineage from Tanzania and a person from Ghana. There's a difference between a Kung tribesman living in the margins of South Africa and somebody, I mean, a person who's a white Boer from South Africa is also an African. Definitely not racially homogenized. A person from Egypt of broadly North African and Arabic descent is an African, but again, there's a cultural difference, there's a linguistic difference, there's a national origin difference, there's a racial phenotypical difference that would be categorized according to most Western standards for legal documentation and stuff. The idea that these people necessarily are all the same is a pile of steaming horseshit. I'm sure if Joe Biden goes to a convention with like black voters or something and says something like this, he's going to get a lot of raised eyebrows, because over in the corner there's going to be like some Nation of Islam members, and then over here you've got some Catholic congregation. They're at each other's throats for religious purposes. You know, somebody, their family, they're the first-gen immigrant from Nigeria, and someone else, you know, their family came over in the early 1800s from, you know, the Ivory Coast in some capacity. These two people, there's no necessary religious similarity. There's no necessary linguistic similarity, at least in the ancestral sense. Biden's all fucked up. Imagine, watch this, again, link in the description. If I were to say this, and I weren't just quoting Biden, I'd probably be at risk for being deplatformed. Patreon would say, well, he's saying racially insensitive shit. This is not allowed. You know, so get booted off there. Your YouTube video, at the very least, would probably get put into limited state. So, and yet Biden gets a free pass. Can you imagine if Trump were to say something like this? It would be headline news for weeks, and you goddamn know it. These people know it, I know it, you know it. Let's just be completely honest here. CNN would talk about it incessantly. Oh, the president has exposed his deep-seated racism and ignorance about racial issues. Where's going to be the ire from the legacy media? Is CNN going to run a front-page report? Biden goddamn clueless about black people? Of course not. Biden prefers Latino voters, calls them diverse. Obviously is making a pitch for the Mexican-American vote or something. We're not going to see headlines like that. Fox will laugh about it a little. It'll get big airplay on InfoWars and Breitbart and, the more business-oriented media sites that actually attempt to do some journalism, and independent content creators will talk about it, much like I am at the moment. This would torpedo Trump's campaign if it happened that he was the one saying this. And if Biden himself, if during the primaries he had said this, it would have torpedoed his campaign too. But the problem is the Democrats have already coronated the dude. They're stuck with him. You've already made him... They still occasionally refer to him as the presumptive nominee. He's locked up the nomination. The ballots are going through the mail. There is no process by which Biden at this point can feasibly be stopped unless he drops, or he dies, or he has such a goddamn Alzheimer's moment, of which this is approaching the proper magnitude, I suppose, that it becomes impossible to even think of a scenario in which you would have him actually be the nominee in November. They'd have to change their rules or something, kick him aside. They'd have to say, okay, well, we officially disown our own candidate. Here's another Democrat that's going to run as an independent, and we're endorsing them instead. You could see a surreal moment like that if that were to happen and Biden were stubborn enough to stay in. I would say this is an 8 out of 10 on the political gaffe scale. This is a major problem for him, and this is a pattern of behavior even over short spans of time. You'll see 5 or 6 mistakes that are at least substantive from Biden in a week-long period. You ain't black, forgetting where he is and then pretending it was a joke, challenging people to push-up contest stuff. How many gaffes are we up to? And I'm not talking the little ones, like stumbling over his words. Okay, he can blame that on a stutter. Nobody cares. Democrats don't care. Republicans will pretend to care, but they don't. I mean, the big one, like this. The fact is that this shows that Biden is either a complete pandering, corrupt scumbag who really just wants to drive a racial wedge for electoral reasons. I think that's the more likely. Or he's so ignorant. He's totally out to lunch. But the thing is, if you look at his track record, yeah, he was sort of the civil rights dude. He was a tough-on-crimer and so forth. But he can't possibly be ignorant enough to think, number one, it was a good idea to say something like this. Like, I don't even... Was he reading a teleprompter at the time? Did his staffer decide to just torpedo his fucking chances in the election? He'd have to be out to lunch. The dude's not playing with a full deck in some capacity or another. And I mean, my goodness, again, if this were Trump saying it, you'd be hearing about it nonstop, but the MSNBC won't even fucking cover it. I highly doubt that, did MSNBC, ABC, all those, did they even make a post about this? Because I have to get things off of Twitter. I have to get things off of Twitter either from Trump's own team, or people surrounding him, or from other independent content creators, or from news tips that people give me from local news sometimes. That's how I find out what's really going on. If you go to CNN or MSNBC and their websites, or watch them, I'm sure, on TV, which is even further sanitized for the soccer mom audience. Now, CNN's average demographic, 66 fucking years old. No offense to anyone in that age bracket, but it's not exactly the median population age. It's heavily skewed by like 25 years or something. You're not getting reality. You think there's no riots, just protests going on. Biden is great and inevitable. Trump, by the way, is Hitler. And that's the reality that you're existing in. It's just not reality. It's not real. It's a very carefully curated image of reality that's the result of wave after wave of daily propaganda. Again, take a look at this. Watch it for your fucking self. It's not edited or anything. It's perfectly in context. He's showing either complete ignorance on the issue, which I think is possible, or he's a complete corrupt scumbag. Either way, it's a major gaffe. This should be considered disqualifying. You don't need a president who says such things. Can you imagine the weird shit he'll say 2-3 years from now? If he's still, above ground, smelling the flowers from above? without an aneurysm laying him low or something like that, or having to resign and end up in the old folks home. They can, again, people make the joke, and I think this would actually be the good thing to do. Just pretend that he won. Let Trump win. Just say, fuck it, this isn't going to work. Make a fake Oval Office, like a fake White House, and he can give like daily press briefings to all of his friends, and they'll just pose as media members. He can pretend to be president for the last years of his life. Make him happy. Because right now he's certainly not being made comfortable at the moment. I think he's been dragged out like a goddamn corpse to run because there's no one else who qualified. They didn't want Buttigieg. Probably they figured, it's too risky. He's too young, and black voters might be turned off by the fact that he's gay. Again, a nice homogeneity there in their analysis as well. That's about all. Peace out.